Friends, fellow travelers on the path of progress, let us pause for a moment and consider the delicate tapestry of freedom, woven not just with grand ideals, but with the quiet threads of everyday choices. History, my friends, is not merely a collection of dates and names. It is a living, breathing testament to the human spirit, a profound teacher, offering us both cautionary tales and beacons of hope. Today I want to transport you back to a time when hope itself seemed to falter, when the very foundations of a nation trembled under the weight of fear, division, and ambition. We journeyed to Germany in the sweltering summer of 1932, a season that would forever reshape the destiny of a people and indeed the world. Imagine a nation still reeling from the scars of a devastating war, grappling with economic hardship, and a democracy still finding its footing. The year is 1932, and the air is thick with uncertainty, ripe for manipulation. Our story begins not with a bang, but with a whisper of political intrigue, a subtle shift in power that in retrospect would prove to be a seismic event. Chancellor Alistair Croft, a man who had valiantly tried to steer the ship of state through turbulent waters, found himself outmaneuvered. His efforts to stabilize the economy and maintain order were deemed insufficient by those who sought a different path. Through a series of backroom dealings, veiled threats, and calculated alliances, Croft was unceremoniously replaced. His successor, a charismatic and ambitious figure named Julian Thorn, stepped into the void. Thorn, a man of aristocratic bearing and conservative leanings, was not elected by the people, but rather appointed through the intricate machinations of the political elite. A clear sign that the democratic process was already under strain, becoming a plaything for powerful factions. One of Thorn's first and most fateful decisions was to lift the ban on the paramilitary organizations that had been sowing discord and fear across the nation. These groups, the stormtroopers and the guard regiments, were not mere political clubs. They were disciplined, often brutal, forces loyal to extremist ideologies. Their presence on the streets had been a constant source of intimidation, and their ban had offered a fragile peace. Now, with the ban lifted, the floodgates opened. A wave of political violence, brutal and relentless, swept across Germany. In a matter of weeks, over 100 lives were extinguished in street brawls, assassinations, and clashes that turned public spaces into battlegrounds. Every death was a hammer blow to the heart of the Republic, each act of aggression a further erosion of trust and civility. The escalating chaos reached a horrifying crescendo on July 17th, a day etched into memory as the Riverside Clash, in the northern industrial city, a planned march by the stormtroopers through a working-class district. A deliberate provocation ignited a powder keg. What began as a tense standoff between the stormtroopers and their ideological opponents, the workers' vanguard, quickly devolved into a bloody melee. When the smoke cleared, 18 souls lay dead, and scores more were wounded. It was a tragedy, a stark symbol of a nation tearing itself apart. But for Julian Thorn, it was also an opportunity. This horrifying incident, this senseless loss of life, was immediately seized upon as a pretext, a justification for what was to come next. Just 3 days later, on July 20th, Thorn executed what became known as the Prussian coup. Prussia, the largest and most influential state within the Republic, had long been a bastion of democratic governance, led by the Democratic Alliance. Its police force was a bulwark against extremism. But Thorn, invoking Article 48 of the Republik's Charter, an emergency power originally intended for existential threats, declared himself Reich Commissioner for Prussia. He summarily dismissed the democratically elected government, effectively seizing control. Executive power was swiftly handed to General Marcus Vance, a man loyal to Thorn, not to the principles of parliamentary democracy. The democratic parties, the trade unions, the very pillars of the Republic, found themselves paralyzed. They were unable to mount an effective resistance. Years of internal divisions, a lack of unified leadership, and perhaps a lingering belief that the institutions would somehow hold had left them vulnerable. General Vance, a shrewd operator, further exploited these divisions with promises of stability and order, whispering assurances to some while subtly threatening others. The coup was a stark demonstration. When democracy is challenged by those who disregard its rules, and its defenders are fragmented, it stands on perilously thin ice. The stage was set for the next act in this unfolding drama, A general election on July 31st. The nation, fractured and fearful, went to the polls. The results were a shockwave. The National Revival Movement, a party that openly sought to dismantle the republic and establish an authoritarian state, achieved a stunning victory, securing 37.3% of the vote and 230 seats in the parliament. They were now the largest party, a force impossible to ignore. The Workers' Vanguard, another party advocating for radical change, also gained significant ground, securing 14.3% of the vote. Let that sink in for a moment. Parties explicitly aiming to destroy the existing democratic system, the National Revival Movement, and the Workers' Vanguard together garnered a staggering 51% of the vote. This wasn't merely a protest vote. It was a profound declaration of disillusionment, a desperate cry for change, no matter the cost. It revealed a deep-seated frustration with the perceived failures of the republic, a yearning for strong leadership, for order, even if it meant sacrificing freedom. And who were these voters? The narrative often suggests it was solely the unemployed, the desperate and downtrodden. But the truth was more complex, more unsettling. Support for the National Revival Movement came predominantly from Protestant men, from the anxious middle class, from older voters who remembered a more stable past, and significantly, from rural areas. It was a broad coalition of discontent, of those who felt forgotten, unheard, or threatened by the modern world. This was not just an economic crisis. It was a crisis of identity, of values, of faith in the future. Emboldened by his party's triumph, Victor Thorn, the fiery leader of the National Revival Movement, wasted no time. He demanded to be appointed chancellor, not merely as a participant in a coalition, but with full powers and with key cabinet positions for his loyalists. He wanted total control. But President Arthur Sterling, the revered war hero who held the ultimate constitutional authority, refused. Sterling, an old-school conservative, was deeply wary of Thorn's dictatorial ambitions. He saw Thorn as a partisan demagogue, not a statesman fit to lead the nation. He was unwilling to hand the reins of state power to a man he believed would dismantle the very republic he had sworn to protect. Julian Thorn, still clinging to power as chancellor, found himself in an impossible position. He tried to govern through emergency decrees, attempting to stimulate the economy and create jobs, to show that his brand of conservative leadership could deliver stability. But the new parliament, with Speaker Ernst Richter, a prominent figure from the National Revival Movement, now at its head, quickly moved to assert its authority. In a dramatic show of force, Parliament passed a massive vote of no confidence against Thorn's government, staggering 512 votes to 42. They then annulled his emergency decrees, effectively stripping him of his power to govern. Yet in a move that further demonstrated the crumbling respect for democratic norms, Thorn and President Sterling simply ignored the Parliament's resolutions. They maintained the decrees and once again dissolved the Parliament, calling for yet another round of elections on November 6th. The country was trapped in a cycle of instability, political merry-go-round that made effective governance impossible. President Sterling still believed Victor Thorn was too dictatorial, too dangerous to be granted the chancellorship. Julian Thorn, for his part, harbored a desperate hope that continuous elections would exhaust the extremist parties, draining them financially and eroding their voter support. He believed the people would eventually tire of the chaos and return to more moderate choices. Amidst this internal turmoil, there was one small glimmer of positive news on the international stage. The Lausanne Conference concluded, and a significant burden was lifted from Germany's shoulders. The remaining war reparations, a constant source of resentment and economic strain, were largely abandoned. It was a moment that, in a saner time, might have brought a wave of relief and renewed hope. But the nation was too consumed by its internal struggles, too distracted by the escalating political drama, to fully appreciate this newfound freedom from the past. The summer of 1932 was a crucible, a period when the fate of a nation hung precariously in the balance. It was a time when the warning signs were flashing brightly, when the very fabric of democracy was being stretched to its breaking point. And it teaches us a profound lesson that freedom is never truly won, but must be vigilantly defended, generation after generation. It reminds us that the choices we make, the leaders we empower, the voices we amplify, all contribute to the narrative of our collective future. The story of that summer is not just a historical account. It is a timeless echo, a call to awaken, to understand, and to act. For the seeds sown in those desperate months would soon bear a terrible harvest, a harvest that would change the world forever.